We all pretty much knew that Rachel Zegler was box office poison, and this all but confirms it. Now, surprisingly enough, if you couldn't already tell, I'm not referring to the Snow White debacle. Because, honestly, I've talked about that enough, so there's obviously nothing new on that front. We know that she's inherent garbage that's trying to push big, modern politics into that film, and from what I've heard, she's basically been the catalyst for it. We will talk about that briefly, or I called it Snow White, I probably shouldn't. It should be called Snow Brown and the Seven Drunk Hobos, but we'll get back to that later. Instead, we're going to start talking with Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is predicted to have the worst opening weekend of the franchise. Now, this franchise hasn't done anything since 2015, back when the Mockingjay movies came out. And they all released one after the other, but this one's already projected to not do that great at the box office. Box Office Pro recently shared their long-range predictions for the Rachel Zegler film, predicting the film will gross between 35 and 45 million in its domestic opening weekend, and it predicted that the film would gross around 90 to 142 million dollars in its entire domestic run. Now, that's quite the gap, might I add. If it opens to 35 to 45 million, I have a hard time believing it'll get all the way up to 142 million dollars, especially when it has competition such as the Marvels and Trolls band together. And the previous worst opening weekend in the Hunger Games franchise was 2015's The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2, which grossed around $102.6 million in its opening weekend, adding up to around 281.7 in its entire domestic run. And we all know why this is. Now, some people have speculated it's because the young adult film craze died out years ago, and that is partially true. I think the last one that was even moderately successful was Maze Runner: The Death Cure, which came out in 2018, early 2018, might I add. And there have been some attempts to adapt young adult novels to the big screen again, or even some to the small screen, like Artemis Fowl, which was horrendous and was hated by everybody. But the big drawback from this movie for most people is Rachel Zegler herself. And it's shown in the other movies that she has starred in. First off with West Side Story back in 2021. Now, I actually did like the remake of West Side Story. I thought it was a good remake, even though I can't stand her still. But I thought the movie was a decent remake. But the movie flopped badly. And you can't blame COVID, because a week later, maybe it was 2 weeks, I don't know, Spider-Man No Way Home came out and made almost $2 billion. So that's not an excuse for that movie. Nobody wanted to see the movie. And then earlier this year, Jesus Christ, was Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which is one of the lowest grossing DCEU films, just ahead of Blue Beetle, Wonder Woman 84, and The Suicide Squad. Two of those ended up releasing on HBO Max on the exact same day, so they have kind of an excuse. And Wonder Woman especially, considering that came out when a lot of theaters were still closed. And then, of course, there's Snow Brown and the Seven Drunk Hobos, which comes out next year. And she's done so many interviews that have pissed people off and have driven them away from the movie. Oh, look, I have footage of her right now. What do you mean you can't see her? She's right there on the screen. I know it's a flaming pile of trash, but what's the difference? Yeah, that's the big thing here, is because most people don't want to watch a movie with this unlikable piece of human trash in it. No one wants to give these movies money, and not to mention, it's a lot of movies nobody cares about. Nobody really cared about a remake of West Side Story. Shazam 2 was one of the most apathetically released superhero films of all time. This movie is a prequel to a franchise that hasn't been relevant in almost a decade, and then no one likes the Disney remakes, and no one's gonna want to watch the new one. Hell, you look at the Little Mermaid's box office numbers, it wasn't good. And with this movie, it has a budget of around $80 million, which surprises me because most blockbusters like this have a $200 million budget, no matter how good or bad it looks. So roughly it would be needing to make around $200 million domestically to break even. That's not true. $200 million worldwide. Will it break that? God, I hope not. And it probably won't, because there is so little hype around this movie. This is just like Blue Beetle and Shazam 2. It's just apathy. No one cares about this movie, and I sure as hell don't care about this movie, but I'm gonna be forced to see it anyway. And no one wants to watch a movie with the box office poison known as Rachel Zegler. So that's all I got, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.